So you graduated from Stanford in 2006. You worked as a management consultant in New York and Europe. You were also a JP Morgan private banker.
Right.
Obviously, you have a link to both these cultures.
Right.
Which culture did you feel or do you feel more empathetic to?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What's really interesting to me is actually the relationship between the two cultures. I find this clash of the suits versus the hoodies that in some ways seem so different, but in other ways are so much the same. These driven by power and ego, and that was really the relationship that I wanted to explore.
Which one is more of a Shark Tank?
Depends on what kind of shark you're talking about. I think Wall Street can be more in your face about it, and sometimes the subtlety of some of the power dynamics in Silicon Valley makes it harder to identify, but
everything's couched in we want to make the world a better place.
Exactly, which sometimes is incredibly authentic and other times does just become a tagline, I think.
So at what point in your career, while you were working in finance, did you decide that you want to write a book, and were you looking at everyone around you and kind of jotting down notes and ideas the whole time?
I did. I naturally observe. It's something I can't really help doing, so I definitely collected a lot of observations in the process. But I had started writing while I was in business school at Stanford, just as a creative outlet, and really fell in love with the capacity of stories to really communicate the context of an environment. I think we hear so much about Wall Street and Silicon Valley as in a nonfiction way, which is helpful on one level, but it's hard to really understand, well, what is it really like to be working in these environments, especially as an analyst or an associate, which the book is really told from the perspective of the 35 and unders.
Why did you choose that demographic?
I think that the millennial ethos is really so ripe for exploration in fiction, and it's something that's not necessarily covered in a way that I think millennials are satisfied by, but also not something that's covered in a way that people who aren't of that generation can understand.
Tell me about your strategy to publish your writing, because you effectively created your own startup with VC investors when you began writing.
Right. On an artistic level, it was a bit meta. I wanted to sort of create a startup out of the startups that I was writing about, and really, in an artistic way, appreciate this new world order. But I was also just really interested in the serial form. It's how Dickens wrote, it's how Henry James wrote. Even Bonfire of the Vanities was initially a serial in the back of Rolling Stone magazine. So I really wanted to see what would happen if we revived that form for a modern audience.
And how much did you alter your story or adapt it or change it as it went along then?
We cut out quite a bit. So initially the story was published as 12 weekly episodes. Each one took about half an hour to read. And it was free on the browser for half an hour, or you could buy it as a text or an audio file. So a lot of people tuned in on their commutes or at work. And then, yes, we did the deal with Putnam and Penguin. Cut about 20,000 words and amped up some of the characters. But the story is mostly the same.
The story is mostly the same, and you envision this as a larger series. There's going to be, what, 6 books?
The plan is to do 5 or 6. We'll see how it goes. But I really thought of it as TV that you can read. I think TV is in such a special place right now, and especially in its exploration of characters. And I think that this book does that and hopefully reads with the same pace.
Why not go the big screen route? Why not Hollywood?
We've just announced the TV.
Oh, breaking news.
But again, as an artist, it's really fun for me to take a story and adapt it to these different forms. So you start in the serial and then move to the book and then get into the television, and each one has its different nuances and things that you're able to do.